And welcome back to Studio A.
Okay, that one's getting old though.
We're bringing that back though. We're going to use that in Toronto.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
So what we'll be talking about now is a new era of threat resistance for the Windows 10 platform.
Yes, so threat resistance, what does that mean? Threat resistance, as we mentioned in Module 5, you may have the best security solutions in the world. You could have that really hardened shell. You still have to deal with the squishy center, but we're dealing with it. And as we mentioned, the security landscape has changed dramatically in the past few years. Mostly in terms of the revolution of cyber threats. So they're everywhere now. It's coming at us from multiple different ways. In the beginning, when we had attacks, such like the blaster, the slammer, it was all like script kiddies type of deal. It was kind of like trying to make themselves a name by taking down something. It wasn't organized. It was kind of like the hacker trying to make a name for themselves and so on. So the sophistication was fairly low, even though at the time they may have done a lot of damage because of the mitigation weren't typically in place for it. So a lot of people got caught flat-footed and ended up with an impact, but there was a fairly low impact. Then we have, in 2005 to the present, it's more like organized crime with ransomware, click fraud, identity theft. I've been victim of identity theft like 3 times now. So I'm very, very careful about all of that type of information in terms of phishing expedition and so on. So it's actually more of a targeted approach now, and they're doing it for profit. So ransomware, where you get an email with a little application or a little attachment. You're not quite sure where it's coming from, or you go and see inappropriate sites, and then first thing you know, it encrypts your data and pops up that's saying, okay, well, you must pay us to get the key to decrypt it, or else we'll wipe your machine. This type of ransomware is more what we've seen since 2005 to the present.
And that's occurring more and more on sites that may not be questionable. Like even shopping. I'm shopping for a project car, looking for a Dodge Challenger, and you run into situations where you go to some specific forums where they sell the cars, and those too get ransomware attacks on them as well.
On canitpro.net, in the comments, we often get people that will put comments with link to places that are bad. So we're trying to do a good job at filtering those and deleting those posts. But every once in a while, there's so many blogs around that some may sneak by. But from 2012 and beyond, the attacks in a lot of cases take shape as like nation activists. For example, the Sony breach and added terror to the playbook. So when Sony got hacked, and it wasn't just about embarrassing the Sony employees and the information that got leaked out of it, but they actually took it to another level where they threatened the lives of people if you were going to go see the movie. So it's a different mentality. It's a different area in terms of, can I mitigate that? If you're looking at the White House, which typically should have unlimited budget to be vulnerable, it was on CNET in 2015. It was reported that the hackers had breached the White House network. Well, I think the White House is equipped. But still, something happened. So how do we deal with this? How do we mitigate those risks? Well, there's 3 ways we need to do it, and then we have to do them like simultaneously. We have to, first of all, to ruin their economic model. And then break their attack playbook, because we do know, because of the information we get from the from McAfee and Symantec and all of those, plus the information that we collect through the software removal tools and the Microsoft Defender and stuff like that. We know what kind of attacks are coming in, or what kind of we've been at it for a long time, so we know what the playbook is, so we try to eliminate those, and we try to eliminate those vectors of attack. So security from inside out. So it's not about bigger walls, it's looking outside the bigger walls and inside the bigger walls.
Well, remember, just protecting the perimeter is not enough, right?
No.
Because once you get inside the perimeter,
Well, and we talked about this in Module 5,
Yep.
where often the leaks come from inside, and the leaks are typically accidentals.
Yep.
So we have to deal with that. And how do we deal with that? Well, for identity protection, let me just build out this thing here so we can just talk to it.
Yep.
We have identity protection, so password theft, increasingly successful. Multi-factor solutions are too complex. That's what's in Windows 7 or in previous versions of Windows.
Bolt-on. It was a bolt-on.
It was bolted on.
Yep.
So right now in Windows 10, it's part of the platform. It's built into it,
Yep.
where we have viable password alternatives. We have easy or low-cost multi-factor, especially if you're going with Azure Active Directory,
Yep.
where you can use a phone as your second factor and we'll talk about this in the next module with Microsoft LO or Microsoft Passport, where you get biometrics as your second factor authentication. So we are building this into the platform. In terms of disk encryption, again, in Windows 7 and in previous versions, the encryption was there and the possibilities were there, but it was more difficult to deploy, more difficult to manage. We did have third-party or use a third-party solution for DLP. So DLP really means data loss prevention.
Yep.
In Windows 10, disk encryption increasingly enabled out of the box. So you get it, boom, Windows 10, you install it. Encryption available in all the SKUs, BitLocker on Pro and Enterprise. DLP is in Windows. It's better with Azure and Office, of course. In terms of threat resistance, 300,000 malwares threats per day.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure where that statistics comes from, but it's very scary.
Remember, this is a mobile-first world. So
Yeah.
those threats come on all platforms, right? It's something that keeps IT professionals up at night, because it's no longer just attacking the desktop. It's attacking any device that connects to your infrastructure.
And not just the desktop, but also attacking the users.
Yep.
Which is where we have to worry about that. So with that amount of attacks, the antivirus can't really keep up. So with Windows 10, we rate new malware threats per day is irrelevant. We lock down Windows only to trusted apps, so with Device Guard and Windows Defender. In terms of security of hardware, we have hardware protects system integrity with the UEFI and Secure Boot and the TPM and virtualization. And so these are all, so LO, Passport, BitLocker, Device Guard, UEFI, all built into Windows 10 out of the box in the platform, so you can enable those solutions with very little friction on the user side, and also ease of management for the IT pro side. So it's, again, a win-win situation, because when you look at Windows 10, how it protects you, it secures your identities, it secures the information. So we talked about that in the last module, securing the information with rights management, securing the identities with Azure AD and AD, and then adding threat resistance to the Venn diagram. So we want to be right in that middle where we are fully protected, or as protected as you possibly can. Because you really have to look at it holistically. It's not just protecting the device, it's not just protecting the user, it's protecting everything: security, information, and threat resistance. We've improved the threat resistance, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. So in today's challenge, we have the apps. The model we've had in the past is that the apps were trusted by default unless a threat was detected.
Correct.
So it was always a reactive process. So we see an attack in the wild, or we see an exploit in the wild, we deploy either a patch or a virus signature that will apply that, push that out. But there's a gap in there from the time we notice it to the time where it's deployed. So we've defined these as threats, but it was kind of like a reactive. What we want to go, it was detection based, so not. So what we want to do is, for in the future, we want to make sure that the apps have to earn the trust before they're allowed to run, which makes sense.
100%.
So signed
applications.
signed applications, signed binaries.
Yep.
All that in order to make sure that you can trust where it comes from.
Yep.
And there's two parts to do that in Windows 10. There's Device Guard, which is a new approach for Windows Desktop, and it requires change in process for the apps that offer that protection. The traditional approach have been to require additional software to manage and carry that risk. So you needed like App Locker or anything else to manage that. Now with Device Guard, it's hardware rooted in app control, so you can enable Windows Desktop to be locked down to run only trusted apps.
Yep.
And just like many OS, mobile OS. So
Yep.
if you look at Windows 10 on the phone,
Yep.
you can't just take an EXE and run it, or MSI and run it and deploy it on that
Yep.
phone. That phone will only support the applications that come from the store. And the store, when somebody supplies or presents an application to be hosted on the store, it's reviewed. Depending on which API that application uses, it will go into further scrutiny to actually figure out exactly what that does. And there's a team of people. So,
Yep.
And then once we've looked at it and we know that application is safe, then we stamp it. We put it on the store, and at that point, you know that application is actually proved to
Yep.
be trustworthy before you can get it on your device.
And taking it to the next step, you have now the ability on the business store. So having a store specific to your organization, using that same digital signature and issuing the certificate specific to your organization's requirements to then still lock down that application onto trusted devices.
Yeah, and then you get untrusted apps, so older apps that are like EXEs and
Yep.
MSIs that malware can enable to run. Those also can be managed. Resistant to tampering by administrator or malware. So one of the things they can do is you can require devices that are specifically configured either by the OEM or the IT in order to look at that. We also have support for universal desktop. So when we're looking at Windows Win32, what do we do with these apps?
Yep.
Well, there's a way that the apps can be signed or put into a catalog. So if you're your own application or applications that are old enough that they weren't signed and the vendor may not exist anymore, but you trust them because you've been running them for a while, so you
Yep.
can put those in the catalog, sign the catalog itself with your own certificates, and then once that catalog is done, then they can be deployed in your environment trusted. So the machine Windows 10 that'll get it will actually trust the signature of the catalog and allow that machine or those apps to run on there. So again, they've proven, well, basically you vouched for them
Yep.
to be deployed in your environment.
And what a huge advantage if you've deployed universal apps. You know, you do this once and it runs across the entire Windows 10 platform. It's not that I have to create digital signing for each specific, mobile, tablet, laptop, PC. It's you do it once in the universal app and it's accepted by the Windows 10 platform across the board.
Yeah, and we are putting together some processes and tools for ISVs and OEMs to actually provide for them to present us their application.
Yep.
We'll sign them on their behalf
Yep.
and make that available. So the app has to be trusted. It has to prove that it's worthy. We're not worthy. We have to prove that it's worthy before it actually will deploy on a Windows 10 machine, and that's like out of the box. The other thing is the hypervisor code integrity protected by VSM. And what we talk about when we say VSM is the virtual secure mode. Virtual secure mode is kind of like this virtual environment on your in your machine,
Yep.
in which the local security auth services, so the LSAS service.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful, especially after a day of talking.
Yes.
The virtual TPM and the hypervisor code integrity, they run in this virtual area, so the VSM. And the VSM is basically segregated from the rest of the application or from the rest of your environment or your OS. So even if the machine itself gets compromised, it won't compromise. It still has to pass the information to the those services that are running in that virtual secured mode in order to pass on your authentication, your virtual TPM, and so on. So your app's running on top of a kernel, running on Windows, with the hypervisor in between, it passes the information to the local security authentication service. If it works, it comes back out with your claim, and you keep going. Boom. So that environment, segregated, doesn't get affected, but even if the machine gets compromised in some way. So there another level of security there. The traditional approach is the way things have always been, and it requires additional software to manage. I think we've addressed that here. In terms of the device integrity, so ensuring that the Windows can start on a trustworthy device. So we have device-level malware that can hide from the defense. So if it's a rootkit, a bootkit, firmware infection, or something like that, if it's there before the OS boots, there's nothing you can do about it.
Correct.
No antivirus will help you there. So you can do some cold boot with removable media and do a scan of the machine. But you have to know that it's there, and the AV won't see it because it's sitting underneath the OS, and you are compromised at that point. So very, very hard to take advantage of. So how does Windows 10 work with that? Well, UEFI so provides tamper-proofing of firmware and protects the firmware from all other ROMs. UEFI ensures that Windows will start, that the bootable bits on the hard drive are actually signed, and that signature is recognized and trusted by UEFI before it actually boots. So if you got a bootkit installed, not going to be signed, and it won't allow it to boot. So it'll boot into recovery mode. There was a while when we first came out with UEFI, and there was the Linux community were saying that there was our way to block the Linux adoption on platform. It's nothing further from the truth. We have worked with all the major distribution to actually provide that signature to UEFI to allow those distribution to run. So for IT pros out there, you don't have to be concerned about turning on UEFI to block other distribution. But of course, if it's something that you've built in your basement, it may not run because it's not signed. So we have to make sure that it's trusted.
We have basements in our igloos?
I do. And of course, the TPM that provides service to enable local and remote verification of the system. So UEFI, first of all, is a requirement for anything that's Windows 8 and above certified. So anytime you buy a machine that's got that Windows certified logo on it, you know that a UEFI is on there, and it'll do. And TPM, the majority of machines out there now do have TPM.
Not all.
Not all. If you go to consumer grade machines, they may not have TPM. But for enterprises and even small, medium businesses, there are lots and lots of options that include the TPM to do that. TPM, by the way, is not just a key repository.
Correct.
Because somebody came up to me the other day and said, well, you store the key in TPM, but what if you can just extract the key? TPM is actually a crypto processor, so it's not just a chip where you store a key. So it's a hardware crypto processor. And in terms of the platform integrity, we also want to make sure that we mitigate for attacks that tamper with the core and the entry or the system that passed the system defense. So the infected drivers, like things that run at a low level on your machine. So Windows as the trusted boot. We had that in Windows 8, improved in Windows 10. Trusted boot that prevent the malware from starting during the boot process. So, okay, UEFI, the boot process is trusted. I allow you to boot. But once it's booted, if something was going to come in and inject itself in the boot process, it could be bad because, again, it'd be there before your anti-malware would be loaded, and that way you could actually have dire consequences. But with trusted boot, it actually ensures that every part of the boot is trusted, and if anything changes in the order of the boot or something that's untrusted, we'll actually stop and roll back. So Windows isolated system core and puts those sensitive processes into a container that offers protection, and even from kernel level breach. Provable PC health, you mentioned that earlier, where you actually have, your machine has to prove itself to be healthy and protected before it will be allowed to connect to the rest of the network. This has been around for a long time. NAP, Network Access Protection. Not very many people actually deployed it, but now we're making it, again, built into the platform, a lot easier to leverage. So that's, by making it easier, less friction, easier deployment, and you get the advantage, or you get the value that this will bring to you. So value for the IT pros, not as many steps or not as hard in order to deploy and manage. To the users, completely transparent, so no friction there. For the enterprise, well, you're just that more secure. So we're kind of addressing those because if a machine that's compromised connects to the network, then that just spill out, and that squishy center becomes compromised everywhere.
Yep.
So the platform and the platform and the app security. So we want to protect the system and protect the apps from the most common attacks and the malware. So we do have in Windows 10 capabilities to mitigate those types of attacks. So like the LSR, so address space layout randomization. So the machines won't always address the memory in the same way. It'll randomize it, so the malware that's looking to get to that info will not be able to do that. In terms of also, it protects for buffer overrun attacks, because once it gets to the end of the buffer, there's no more, or the addressable memory is not there. So you can't inject your code, you can't inject your malicious info into that buffer overrun and take advantage of it. So there are other tools such as CFG, so control flow guards, and all kinds of different mitigation that are built into Windows 10 platform. And of course, if we look at the Windows vulnerabilities, we've basically raised the bar, where we continue to raise the bar and raise the cost for the bad guys to actually do the so in terms of prior to 2003, we really had no mitigation. It was kind of like an open door. With XP, with SP2, then we got DEP, we got Safe SEH, heap hardening, the impact, so data couldn't be executed as code, protection for stack buffers, exception change, and so on. Windows 7, that we introduced the first version of SLR, and of course to check about for memory layout randomized, improved protection for heap and metadata. Windows 8, we took it a step further with ASLR version 2. DEP, heap hardening version 3, and Windows 10, we've taken it further with the CFG, or the flow control. So platform security app, so we're protecting the system, we've protected the app from most malware, offer secure event channels for advanced malware analytics. So there is a, missing the words right now, process and facilities that will analyze and look at the malware, or the types of malware that are in there, and give you compatibility to other apps, but without blocking those attacks. Of course, Windows Sandbox Universal Apps, so the app containers validate the code integrity. App Locker is still available. And those, it can be considered whitelisting. And there's nothing wrong with that. If these are the applications you trust, then you put them in the container and everything is working fine. So this is still good. Now, online safety, because really those attacks, they don't just suddenly appear on your machine. They have to come from somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've talked about this before, where applications on some app stores, or if an application gets on your device, like a flashlight app that has malware intentions in the background grabbing your data, how do we safeguard for that?
Yeah, well, what we've done is by default, out of the box, included Windows Defender in as an advanced malware protection in every version of Windows 10.
Yes.
It was there before. It's based on security essentials that we had back in Windows 7.
Yep.
But now it's installed, and it's a lot. In previous versions, to actually turn it off was relatively easy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give the recipe online, but it was relatively easy to actually turn it off in order to be able to attack the machine.
Yes.
Now it's extremely hard to turn it off. But it does turn itself off when it detects other third-party antivirus solutions. So if you got Symantec, or if for a consumer that installs that machine and you get that 30-day trial of McAfee or Symantec or some other AV anti-malware protection, it'll run. And at the end of 30 days, when your free trial suddenly stops and then it starts asking you, consumer a lot of times just don't pay any attention to that, and they don't actually renew it. So your machine is left unsecure. Well, not anymore, because a defender will realize by doing like checks that the other anti-malware is actually not working anymore, and will either pop you up to remind you, or will actually turn itself back on. So it's always there, and they really provide an advanced malware solution, and it's not there to. It's not there to replace, but to complement. So it's protected by default in client and server. So now the Defender is in versions of server. It makes the user always protected, and of course the malicious software removal tool that we get through the Windows update. In the cloud, so in terms of detection, so we've got protection cloud, anti-malware, scan interface, and secure kernel event channels for anti-malware. So these are things we talked about a little bit earlier. And of course, the resilience and the recovery. We've got Windows Defender offline in Windows RE. So even if you're booting from a light version from a media, for example, you're still protected at that point. And also, of course, protecting the guard. So online safety, ACE taken care of in terms of we include Defender. Oh, and of course, IE still has Smart Screen to block malicious sites before they get a chance to impact you. And I keep telling my dad called me not too long ago and says, I keep getting this message about Smart Screen. Should I turn that off? No, turn it on, leave it on, because he's 72 years old. He gets emails from all of his buddies with like PowerPoints, slides from God knows where, or check out this new joke of the week. And of course, he clicks on all of them. Oh,
I know.
Turn it on, leave it on. So it's included. Oh, I got the same slide twice. Internet Explorer provides 0-day protection for commonly used exploits. Because typically, the protection in IE is not so much IE, but it's the plugins. So if we look in the past for the exploits, and you look 0 days that were impacting IE. So in 2006, 2008, we were not doing so well. 2009, 10, they started doing better. And then from 2011 to 2014, we did really, really good. So no 0 day actually infected or applied to IE, because we like kept on top of it. In 2014 something happened, but it was mostly because of those plugins that you have, those ActiveX plugin, Flash plugin, Java plugins, anything else that comes into it. So it's not so much IE, but the applications. And if we look at this is the threat detection by active control. in September of November 2014, and you can tell that the purple and yellows are PDFs, your Flash, your Java, are really the parts that get attacked.
Yep.
Flash.
As a point of entry.
Yes, it's the point of entry because it gets to a point where we've hardened the OS and the IE so much that the easiest path for the bad guys is to attack the soft, squishy parts that we as users will tie on to our browsers. So we've got to be careful with what we install because we may not always be sure as to where they come and how they're being managed. And of course, so unhealthy client will proliferate malware. So you get access. You try to get access to your network resource. The machine will say, yep, you're in. So that's the way it used to be.
I know.
Now we have conditional access, so that provable PC health that we talked about protects the resources by denying the access until you've proven to me. So that's the old NAP and the new PPCH health stain claim. So the way it works is really I'm a user at a machine and I ask for resource or to access to a specific resource.
Yep.
Me access, please. And then the infrastructure will basically come back to me and say, prove it. Are you healthy? Prove it. Then you say, okay. So you send to your request to the Intune and the Windows PPCH that is in the cloud. It checks to make sure your EFI boot state is clean. It checks to make sure that your client policies, so AV, firewalls, patch states, everything is set. Then it sends back the approval in terms of set of a claim, and in terms of client policies, I say Intune, but AirWatch, Mobile Iron, they all kind of participate in that. Once you get the claim back saying that yes, I am healthy, I pass that proof on to the infrastructure, and then the infrastructure lets me in.
Yep.
So we've secured the identities. We've talked about that this morning. We've secured the information. We just talked about that in Module 5. Now we have set Windows 10 to resist the threats, not just by reacting to them, but by being proactive and blocking the entrance and asking the apps, the access, the users, everybody to prove themselves before they get access to the system. So it is a new threat era.
Yep.
But I believe that Windows 10 gives you the best value and the best mitigation processes and tools to make sure that in this new era of threats that you are well protected.
What's fascinating is a lot of the security enablement that's made available on Windows 10 stemmed from mobile. It stemmed from the fact that, because we're doing things differently and we're working differently, mitigating the risk by implementing solutions introduced in mobile, now making it down to the desktop is making us that much more secure.
Well, we are in a mobile world.
We are. So that's the end of module number 6.
Yep.
Next up, we're doing secure authentication with Windows Hello.
Hello.
It's going to be a fun one.
Hello.
So stay tuned.